I'm super excited to be with you this morning because I want to talk to you about a missed opportunity that could potentially infuse trillions of dollars into our economy. But before I do that, I want to tell you a little bit about my background. You see, I was born in Mexico into a family of bootstrap entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs that started businesses not because it was cool or because it was sexy or because they wanted to end up on the cover of Forbes magazine. They started businesses out of need and as a way to provide for their family. You see, my mom, as a single mother, somehow managed to raise my sister and I, all while owning and operating her flower shop out of her home in Mexico. Now, luckily, she didn't have to do that all on her own. She had the help of my grandparents, who were also entrepreneurs. My grandpa owned a chemical supply warehouse in Mexico, and my grandma, a small little convenience store in her neighborhood, better known as a tiendita in Mexico. So I grew up with really understanding the challenges that entrepreneurs go through when they have limited access to capital and limited access to resources. I also grew up with a very deep love and appreciation for the sacrifices that entrepreneurs often have to go through in order to stay afloat. I love entrepreneurs so much that I actually ended up marrying a serial entrepreneur. And a funny story about how I ended up doing what I do today is that about 3 years ago, right after Chris had just sold his previous business, I went through one of those midlife crises. You know the type. The type that want to make you do crazy things, like quit your six-figure salary at a prominent private investment firm so that you can go change the world. I did that. I quit a 10-year career in private investments and economic development so that I could convince Chris to start a company with me that would connect entrepreneurs with the capital and the resources they needed in order to start businesses in our region. And sure, I didn't necessarily set out to change the world, but I do want to fundamentally change the face of entrepreneurship in America. You see, we've all been accustomed to this image of how the mainstream media often portrays successful entrepreneurs. You've heard the story. The lone wolf, self-made billionaire who started in their garage with very limited resources, very humble beginnings. That makes for a great story. But there's actually a lot of inconsistencies in the way in which those stories are often told. You see, a lot of these gentlemen had plenty of access. A lot of them actually went to Ivy League schools, whether they graduated or not. They still had access to Ivy League schools. A lot of them had access to generational wealth and/or friends and family that could invest in their startup at a very early stage so that they could take the risk. And even if their startup failed, they had a cushion to go back to, right? Their startup fails, I'll go back to my friends and family, get another job, and maybe raise capital from them again so I can start another startup. And that's great for them. I'm not here to critique them, and I'm certainly not here to minimize the accomplishments that these gentlemen have made. But I am here to tell you that most Americans don't have that type of leverage. In fact, access to capital continues to be one of the main barriers to entry for entrepreneurs, particularly for entrepreneurs of color and for female entrepreneurs. You see, 80% of startups never access traditional loans. 80%. And less than 1% of startups ever access venture capital. If that wasn't bad enough, venture capital is actually very concentrated, given that 78% of it is spent in 3 states, none of which are in our region. So as a result, we actually started seeing a lot of entrepreneurs leave our state in search of this capital. It's actually one of the fundamental reasons why Chris and I decided to start a firm that would start connecting this capital to entrepreneurs so that they would stay here. They didn't feel like they had to leave the state in order to build these tech companies or these high growth companies. And by the way, if you happen to be an entrepreneur of color or a female entrepreneur, your odds of raising capital are actually much, much lower. Given that out of all the venture capital spent, less than 2% goes to female entrepreneurs, and less than 1% goes to entrepreneurs of color. Why? Why is that? Well, if you ask investors, a lot of them will tell you that there's just not enough women entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs of color starting high growth businesses. What do I mean by high growth businesses or investable businesses? You see, investors don't like to invest in small businesses, like the one that my mom built or the one that my grandparents built. They like to invest in companies that are designed to grow exponentially and very, very fast. Companies like Google, Amazon, HubSpot, you name it. That's why you see a lot of investors investing in the tech space and or healthcare space, because of the exponential to grow. And so their argument is that there's just not enough women or entrepreneurs of color starting these type of businesses. But I would argue that the problem is more systemic in nature. And it's rooted in three fundamental causes that I want to talk to you about. The first root cause that I feel we need to understand in order to solve this challenge is that inequality compounds. You see, when rounds of funding for female entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs of color are rare, investors start to perceive them as uncommon. And what do we do as human beings when things are uncommon? We shy away from them, right? We put a barrier in between us because we instinctively treat uncommon with suspicion. And in turn, we make fewer investments. And the fewer investments, the fewer exits, and the fewer success stories, and the fewer role models. And so the spiral continues and inequality compounds. Just last week, as I was preparing for this specific talk, I came across this article from Forbes with the list of the most innovative leaders in America. There was 101 individuals included in this list, and only one of those individuals happened to be a woman. One out of 101 of the most innovative leaders in America. Barbara Rentler ranked 75 on that list, and her picture wasn't even included. In fact, when I clicked on that article, there wasn't even a figure of a female. The figure wasn't a shape of a female. It was a shape of a male figure. True story, look it up. Of course, a Twitter war erupted right after Forbes released this article. Both men and women were upset about the list. But I don't want to debate whether Forbes used the right algorithm or the right methodology when they come up with this list. But I do want to talk to you about the dangers of this constant lack of representation when it comes to the media. You see, the space already feels unwelcoming to female entrepreneurs and to entrepreneurs of color. And so I can't help to wonder how many talented individuals are choosing alternative career options because they just seem the barriers to entry is too high. And so they rather do something else. The second root cause I want to talk to you about is unconscious bias. We all have it. It's the way in which our brain works, and it's the way in which we make decisions. You see, we make decisions by comparing our current situation with previous experiences, right? And then we draw conclusions out of that. But what happens if we created an image in our mind of what a successful entrepreneur looks like? I'll tell you what happens. We apply that image as a filter when making investments. This is Sean Akadiri. He is the founder of AgBoost, a data analytics company that helps livestock producers breed superior animals through data analytics. So the easiest way to describe it is think of 23andMe, but for cattle and on steroids. And when Sean was first raising capital, some of the things he would hear back from investors was that he would never be able to make it into the ag industry because of the color of his skin. True story. because of the fact that he didn't wear Wranglers and boots. Or he would hear things like, you know, Sean, go raise a round of funding from friends and family first, and then come pitch us once you have traction. We don't have time. The girls will get mad at me if I go over my time. So I'm not even going to go into the comments of the color of the skin and not wearing Wranglers and boots to fit into the ag industry. Happy to say that Sean is actually very successful. He's actually doing businesses in more than 5 countries and has plenty of ranchers on his side. But I do want to talk to you about this notion that entrepreneurs should raise their first round of funding from friends and family, because that notion is born out of pure bias. You see, the average net worth of an African American family is $17,000. The average net worth of a Hispanic family in our country is around $12,000. Compare that to the average net worth of a white American family in our country, it's about $140,000. I don't care how great your idea is or how big the market is. If your family or friends don't have the capital or the generational wealth to invest in your company, they're not going to write you a check. The third root cause is lack of representation, not just in the media, but in the investment space. Although investors are starting to realize the social and economic benefits of having diverse portfolios, there's still a huge lack of representation in their investment teams, particularly when it comes to decision-making roles. In fact, a very comprehensive set of data dating back to 1990 that lists all of the VC organizations and investors in our country tells us that for the past 28 years, the industry has remained the same, with less than 8% women investors, less than 2% Hispanic investors, and even fewer than 1% African American investors. How can we expect investors to be able to relate to the challenges that women entrepreneurs or multicultural founders have to go through if there's no representation in their teams? How can we expect women entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs of color to feel welcome in pitching to venture capital firms if there's no representation in their teams? Is it really a lack of deal flow? Or are we just not looking because we don't have diversity in our teams? So we don't know what to look for. This is Allison Conti. I actually think Allison may be in the audience with us today. She is the founder of Fleeky Lady. Allison created an over-the-counter solution for women that are experiencing urine leakage after giving birth. Now, for those moms of you in the room, you know that this problem is very real, and you probably also know that it affects about 1/3 of women in the world. The problem that Allison often has to deal with is that 9 out of 10 times she has to pitch her company to a room full of male investors who don't understand the problem, they can't relate to it, and so they often miss out on how great the opportunity could potentially be. According to a recent and extensive study by Morgan Stanley, more than $4 trillion are being left at the table by investors continuing to overlook entrepreneurs of color and female entrepreneurs. $4 trillion. $4 trillion that could be going into our economy right now. Now you see, Chris and I are not social or impact investors. We're capitalists. We see the opportunity. So we're going to take advantage of it. We're vested in solving this problem. But we're also personally invested in solving this problem. You see, we also happen to be the proud parents of two beautiful Hispanic girls. And we want to make sure that if in the future they decide to establish a high-growth business, or they want to go into the investment sector or the technology sector, we want to make sure that they have the same level of access than their peers, regardless of the gender or regardless of the social economic status. Now, you may be sitting in the audience thinking, well, I'm not a female entrepreneur. I'm not an entrepreneur of color. I don't know anybody that is, and I'm also not an investor. So what does this have to do with me? I'll tell you why this problem affects every single person in this room. As the gaps between the haves and have-nots keeps getting wider, the cost of inequality is setting up. And although some people may argue that we're living under a thriving economy, in a flourishing economy, a divide between our political systems and those that feel left out of today's innovation economy continues to go up. This problem, it's only going to get worse as technology continues to take over some of our industries and continues to make a large portion of our workforce obsolete with things like artificial intelligence and automation. This problem is fundamentally fracturing the way we get along with our neighbors. It's fueling crime in our communities, and it's ultimately defining our generation. Now, there are some people in government and in politics trying to solve this problem through policy. But I believe that a problem of this magnitude is going to require all of us to participate, all of us to level up. Because if we truly want to build an economy that works for everyone, we have to make sure that this economy is inclusive and that entrepreneurship is equitable. Thank you.